Hello, everybody. This is Anna Pierre from Norton with Fulbright, Global Head of Energy, and just back from the COP26. Today, I just wanted to have the views of Elisa de Wit, a partner in our Melbourne office and in charge of our Australian climate change and sustainability practice. It's very important, obviously, to have Elisa's vision because you are considered as the Australian preeminent climate change lawyer, and you are a chair of the Carbon Market Institute, as well as a director of Beyond Zero Emissions and the Grampians Wimmera Wally Water Corporation. So that means you're the expert. So close of COP26. Some will say it's a failure. Others say there is some wins. Elisa, from your perspective and your practice, what is the best outcome from Glasgow? What do you think?
Well, thanks, Anne. I guess the greatest achievement really this time around was finalisation of the Article 6 rules, right. Which is the rules for the carbon markets and the development of international carbon markets. So a big part of our practice is assisting clients participate in carbon markets. So it's really fantastic to have those rules finalised. It sets the kind of signal as well for private sector engagement and investment into carbon abatement projects. And so I think that clarity has been really missing to date. It's taken 6 years to get to this point, but it is a really good outcome. So some of the stumbling blocks that had really, I guess, hindered getting to this point were firstly corresponding adjustments. So this is really making sure that two countries are not claiming the same emission reduction twice, so that if one country is going to do a project to reduce emissions and sell essentially the credits from that project to another country, that originating country can't claim the credits as well as the country using it towards their nationally determined contribution. So that was a really big sticking point, but Brazil, who'd been holding out on that, and some of the other developing countries did come around to concede that at these talks. So that was a really good achievement. Another one was share of proceeds. So this is really ensuring that the value that gets generated from these credits can actually flow back to the developing countries to help them adapt to the impacts of climate change. And what we saw as the outcome there is 5% now going towards an adaptation fund that will be set up to support those developing countries. So we know that doing carbon projects and reducing emissions through the use of a price on carbon is a key aspect of ultimately getting to where we need to get to with this transition. And I think the voluntary market is really starting to take off, but will be mobilised and incentivised by having these rules finalised. So it's just brilliant to kind of have that settled and to now really be able to see that investment come into the sector.
Yeah, that's great, and Brazil actually was the first one to share its joy about this Article 6 agreement, because as we know, they plan to be exporter. So that's probably a great achievement. It seems that a massive amount of people have been focusing on the fact that exit of coal was not actually written down, only decrease and a transition. But that's definitely a great achievement to have Article 6 agreed, and we foresee, I guess, a boom in the carbon market thanks to that agreement. So definitely, I guess, a key cornerstone. What are the other developments, and in particular, nature-based solutions? Do you see Elisa as being important in the rules of achieving net part of net zero? What is your view on what has happened so far?
Yes, so clearly the whole kind of aspect of net zero involves a net component. So obviously the first objective is to reduce all of the emissions that we can out of the economy across the whole of the economy. But at the end of the day, we know that it's not going to be possible to get to zero. And so going to need to offset those residual emissions. So the net bit is really important. And a big part of that is going to be generated by what we call nature-based solutions or natural capital arrangements, and very much involving project activity on the land. It's worth noting that 8% of global emissions at the moment comes from deforestation globally, which is more than the EU emissions footprint in total. So there's a huge contribution that deforestation makes. But also I think agriculture is the real sleeper for me. So we get a lot of focus obviously on the energy sector and the energy transition and the transport sector. But, you know, the ag sector and that whole land use area contributes a huge proportion of global emissions, and that ag sector really needs to be addressed if we're going to get that emission reduction across the world. So one of the really encouraging things was a announcement that came out early in the COP, which is the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use. And this is pretty amazing. It's had 100 plus countries sign up already, covering about 91% of the world's forests. And in particular, it includes Brazil, China, and Russia. So really important signatories. So the aim of this declaration is to reverse and halt forest loss and land degradation by 2030. And if that's achieved, we could be looking at about a 1.1 gigaton emission reduction throughout this decade. So that was really encouraging. We've seen the financial sector also come in and back that space as well. So an announcement came out from over 30 financial institutions representing about 8.7 trillion, saying that they are going to be committed to eliminating commodity-driven deforestation in the investment and lending portfolios by 2025. So some really strong announcements that have come out in that kind of land-based forestry space.
Right. And we had the chance, obviously, at Norton with Fulbright, to run a certain number of discussions during COP and to run a certain number of events under Chatham House rules to discuss with our clients about maybe the more difficult conversation that may not take place officially. And it seems that there is a dynamic that we see in the private sector, which may be different than the one we're seeing with the parties and the official negotiations. What is your take on that, Elisa, in terms of the flow into the private sector, and what are the key points you see that really are potentially encouraging?
Well, I happen to think, and this is obviously particularly from an Australian context, that the private sector is actually leading the government, if you want. They're out in front. They see the need to undertake this transition. They've come out really strongly with net zero targets or shorter term targets. They understand the need to get investment flowing into emission reductions and mitigation activities. And so I actually happen to think that they are going to significantly drive the transition that takes place. Obviously, government plays a really important role in terms of the policy and the regulatory settings. But I do think the private sector, particularly over the last 2 years, interestingly, which is during our COVID pandemic, but they really seem to have leapt ahead in terms of understanding what's needed. And as we know, there's a lot of capital around, and it just needs to find a home in terms of scaling up project level activity, but really scaling up transformation across all of these different sectors.
Wow. So that's moving definitely. And I think that's what we've been witnessing in Australia, but also in the rest of the world, is that in any case, 100% of the CEOs we've been talking with are in charge of a business which they need to adjust. And they fully understand that the transition is not for tomorrow, the transition is for today. So I think the only open question is the speed at which they need to adjust their business model. But we will be there to assist them, witness that and to share with you. So that was the feedback from Elisa de Riet from Melbourne, our expert in climate change and carbon markets, coming back from COP26. We're there for you if you've got any question. Thank you very much.